I would imagine if anyone is doing a primer on the High Holy Days, they would probably talk about two books, the Book of Life and the Book of Death. Now, we don't usually talk about that with our children. We often usually talk about the Book of Life. And in fact, it's sort of what we sing at the end of the Amidah throughout the season. Sefer Chaim Bracha V'Shalom. Right? This idea of a book of life, a book of blessing, a book of peace. But the truth is, the rabbis of at least the Talmud saw it one step deeper and didn't talk about a book of life and a book of death at all. They talked about a book of the righteous, the tzaddikim, a book of the wicked, the rishaim. And even though that theology really personally doesn't sit well with me at all, it's almost as if it didn't sit well with them either, because they talked about a third book, the book of the Beinonim, which I usually translate as the in-betweeners or the middlers. So we have to ask the question, before we even get to the idea of a book of life and book of death, if we start with these three, the righteous, the middlers, and the wicked, we have to ask the question, who are the middlers? What are middlers? And in the same conversation in the Talmud, in Masechet Brachot, there's a debate about who the middlers are. And the point of the debate has to do with one's yetzer, one's inclination, one's drive. With regard to one's inclinations, it was taught in a Braita that Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, he says that the righteous, the good inclination, the Yetzer Tov, it rules the righteous. The idea is, my heart is dead within me, meaning I am only going to be driven by that which is good and not my desires, not my internal primal drive. The evil inclination has been completely banished from the heart of the wicked, from the righteous. So for the righteous, they're only driven by the good inclination. The evil inclination, according to Rabbi Yossi HaGalili, drives the wicked. Now this makes sense so far. The good inclination for the righteous, the evil inclination for the wicked. But middlers are ruled by both the good and the evil inclinations. So I imagine some of you are saying, yeah, Rabbi, I know that makes sense, obviously. But then we're all middlers. And we would say, oh, sometimes I feel like I've been driven to do good. Other times I feel like I've gone off the derech, I've gone off the page, I've gone off course, and my evil inclination has driven me there. And so I must be a middler too. In fact, later in the Talmud, Rabbi says, people like us were middling. And his student, his nephew Abaye, is shocked by this statement coming from his teacher. And he says, Imata min beinonim ein lecha tzaddik gamor ba'olam. If you're one of the middlers, ain't such thing as a righteous guy. You think you're a middler? Then what the heck am I? Now, I think this is difficult for us. I mean, at least it's difficult for me. Because I am an incredibly black and white person. Some of you may also be incredibly black and white people. And I've learned that being a black and white person, it's brought me great success, but it's also brought me difficulty in life, in work, in my relationships, in my family. And such a binary outlook allows me to indeed see things with clarity, but then it's also led me to ignore what I've come to realize that the world is implicitly gray, as are each one of us. And so when I put on what I feel are my instinctive lenses to divide the world into completely black and white, I'm actually completely missing the world. And there really is very little in our world that is black and white. Our instinct then, at least my instinct was as I began to ponder what I actually think is a fairly high-level concept, is that we need to figure out how to get comfortable then with the gray. If our inclination is to be black and white, to see the world in this binary way of this way, that way, life, death, good, evil, and we miss the gray, then we have to figure out how to get comfortable with the gray. But really, that is not and cannot be the goal at all. Because getting comfortable with the gray is counterintuitive. Gray is uncomfortable. Gray, by definition, is uncomfortable. It's discomforting. When we cannot put something into a category, it's uncomfortable. It's out of focus. You can't put your finger on it. Some days it's one, some days it's another. You don't really know. And so the goal then is not to get comfortable with the gray. The goal, perhaps, is to find comfort in the discomfort. It's to find comfort in the discomfort. If you think about those moments in your life where someone has said to you, just let your eyes adjust, that's getting comfortable. It's be okay that it's out of focus. That's finding comfort in the discomfort. On one hand, to be blunt, that's not our Jewish tradition at all. Our Jewish tradition seeks to avoid discomfort almost at every opportunity. I was asked last week by someone, Rabbi, why do we have so many Sifrei Torah? Why do we have so many Torahs in the Ark? Why don't we just read from one Torah? The answer is actually a very easy answer. If we're reading from the book of Genesis, and we're also reading from the book of Numbers, you can't just turn the page. And God forbid anyone should have to sit and wait in shul while we roll. We have one that's pre-rolled and another that's pre-rolled, and we take two out. Lest it should be a tircha de tzibora, which is Aramaic for discomfort. A troubling moment for the community. Or better, I always hope that Sukkot is not a day like last night or this morning, but a little bit cooler, but not wet. The rabbis say it's an obligation to dwell in your sukkah on Sukkot, unless it's raining. And as my father always taught me, if the rain drips from the schach and it spoils your soup, go inside. Or if there's a terrible smell, or if there are bugs, and it doesn't count if you're building your sukkah in the garbage alley in New York City, that you can't think to yourself, oh, I'm just going to build my sukkah here and there. And I could give you umpteen more examples. Jewish tradition seeks to avoid discomfort. But on the other hand, in almost this profound theological change of pace, the Talmud does teach us that the discomfort a person endures in this world atones of their missteps. Or better, our discomfort perhaps opens the door to righteousness. Our discomfort perhaps opens the door to righteousness. So if we follow this train of thought and we say, well, Rabbi, how so? How could that possibly be? Rabbi Adin Steinsaltz, who in my opinion is one of the greatest Talmudic luminaries of our day, among other areas of learning, in a completely separate work, he starts to unpack this idea of the middler. And I'll change some of his language because I like this term middler. Rabbi Steinsaltz says, the intermediate person is not merely the median, the halfway point between utter evil and utter goodness. Neither a compromise nor a composite, the middler is in a class alone. The Tanya sees the state of the middler as a legitimate, ongoing state, describing a person whose inner essence and spiritual path is the subject of a lifelong struggle, a struggle that might never each reach a decisive resolution. It describes this person as an elevated individual, as one who, in a certain sense, is in an ongoing struggle and endures the perpetual pain of imperfection. Those of us in the room who know the work of the recovery world, a person is never recovered. They are always in recovery. We who do tshuva have never done tshuva. We're always tshuvaing. And likewise, if we are a middler, according to Rabbi Steinsaltz, we're always middling. But then general discomfort, this idea of the discomfort, the gray, potentially yields discomfort with our own station in life. Last year on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, I gave a Devar Torah in the sanctuary about being happy, happiness, being comfortable with our lot. I spent the year reflecting on that and realized that you either have a good lot or a bad lot. But then I realized that according to Rabbi Steinsaltz, this means it is not bad to endure the perpetual pain of imperfection. It becomes a life charge. Accepting this doesn't mean we need to settle for it or be happy with it. It means frustration is the catalyst to reaction. And if we could do that, that is, I think this finally opens up the door to our path towards self-improvement. We begin to move out of the gray as a middler and begin to shift to being one of the righteous. So this is all prelude to ask the question, what is the vehicle for the transition from middler to righteous? Because if, far be it from me to suggest that we're all middlers, if you believe you're a middler, I think your hope of a next step would not be, I really want to go to the wicked. I would think at this season we're thinking, how do we get out of this middling? How can I stop my car from idling and actually take it to that next layer? I would humbly suggest that the vehicle for the transition is being present and patient. Being present and patient. Being present and patient lets us overcome our Yetzer Hara and embrace our Yetzer Hatov. And that is the true path of Teshuvah, a return to embracing the Yetzer Tov. So how can we be present and patient? In our family, it's putting the phone down, spending more time with our children. It's doing more praising than criticizing. It's showing others, it's showering others with love without expecting the love in return. In our workplace, it's seeking collaboration. It's asking yourself, is this my work or is this my job? Am I leaving the world in a better place than I found it? Or am I clocking in and clocking out? With our friends, it's providing company more than seeking company. It's being there to listen and to lean on. It's being referred to as a friend as opposed to an acquaintance. Being present and patient. Which actually brings us past the path of tshuva this season and this message of Rosh Hashanah and more directly into the 10 days leading to Yom Kippur. Presence and patience is the key to making the best use of our time on earth. Because Yom Kippur is meant to remind us explicitly, as my father always taught me, that time is the only thing of value we have in life. It's the only thing we never get back. And if time is the only thing of value, why waste it dwelling on the discomfort? Dwelling on forcing something into black or white? Use it to dwell on becoming more present and more patient. Use it to drive yourself out of idle. If we could get there, if we could reach all these places, then next year at the High Holy Days, maybe we'll find ourselves less like Rabbi and more like whom we are meant to be, God willing, one of the righteous. Because if we're not one of the righteous, it doesn't mean we're one of the wicked. It means we're in the middle. And then we focus more on the presence and the patience, acknowledging the gray, being uncomfortably right in the middle of it all, and God willing, experiencing a Shana Tova, a good year. That's all we ask for, all we wish for. A good year, which could be a year of being in the middle and a little bit more. Shana Tova.